Hi, I'm Naila. My parents told me not to come to my own sister's wedding because her in-laws didn't want me there. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing I had paid for most of it. The flowers, the venue, even the dress she wore to insult me. They smiled in my face while erasing me behind closed doors. So I did what they never expected. I stopped funding the fantasy. But how do you walk away from a family you built your whole life around and still live with yourself? The message came through just as I was pouring coffee into a chipped ceramic mug. I didn't check it right away. Thought maybe it was another appointment reminder or an automated confirmation from the grocery app. But when I finally picked up the phone, the words on the screen hit me like a slap across the face. Don't come to Luna's wedding. Travis's family doesn't want you there. No, hey, no sorry. Just that. Short, clinical, and very much on brand for my mother. I stared at it, rereading, thinking maybe I'd missed context. Maybe there was more. But that was it. Just one line that turned my stomach. The room was still. My coffee cooled untouched beside me. The early spring breeze drifting in through the kitchen window couldn't even cut through the silence that wrapped around me like a vice. I didn't reply. Not at first. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for the heads up? Guess I'll cancel my hotel now? A million responses came to mind. Some sharp, some passive, some begging for clarification. But none of them made it past my lips. Instead, I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen until it dimmed. Then I tapped the message again. Read it once more. Travis's family doesn't want you there. I wasn't sure what offended me more, that I was unwanted by people I barely knew, or that my own mother had delivered the message like it was a change in weather. Casual, predictable, unavoidable. The next morning, Sandra texted me again, this time with something even more laughable. Lunch Thursday? Just us. I should have said no. Should have told her I was busy or that I didn't do lunches with people who disowned me via iMessage. But something in me, maybe foolishness, maybe the urge to look her in the eye, made me text back. Sure. We met at a little cafe on 12th South, the kind of place with reclaimed wood tables and overpriced kale bowls. She'd already ordered a sparkling water when I arrived. No hug, no smile. She just waved at the chair across from her. Glad you could make it, she said, like I was being difficult. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. I scanned the menu, ordered something I knew I wouldn't eat, and folded my hands in my lap like I was waiting for a verdict. So, she started, sipping her drink, I know the text caught you off guard. Caught me off guard? It was short, I said carefully. She shrugged. I didn't think a long explanation would help. I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. Help who? You? Luna, Travis's parents? Her eyes narrowed slightly. You always make things about you, Naila. That's exhausting. There it was, the first knife. I'd known it was coming. I leaned back. I was the one uninvited. I think I'm allowed a reaction. Sandra didn't flinch. She just pushed her napkin around her plate. Travis's family is very traditional. They have expectations. Luna didn't want drama. Right, I said. Because excluding your sister is the definition of peace. She gave me that look, the one she'd used since we were kids, the one that said I was overreacting again. You and Luna are very different people. She fits in better. I don't remember paying the bill. I know I did because I found the receipt later in my bag, crumpled like a forgotten insult. But the entire second half of that lunch was a blur. Her voice, her words, her calm composure while she essentially explained how I'd never been the daughter she could display to the world without explanation. On the way home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell a friend. I walked the 3 blocks to my condo in silence, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and opened the door to a place that at least had the decency to reflect who I was. Minimal, quiet, mine. I sat down on the edge of the bed, kicked off my shoes, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The light was soft, the shadows familiar, and still, the silence was heavy. That was when it clicked. They'd already chosen. Not just today, not just with this wedding, but years ago. In every holiday photo where I was cropped out, in every oops birthday they forgot. In every call that started with, "Can you help?" and ended with, "Well, you're good at that stuff." I'd been a wallet, a sidekick, a useful footnote, and now that I'd become inconvenient, uncomfortable, they wanted me erased. So be it. I opened my laptop, created a new spreadsheet. I titled it Family Ledger. Line by line, I began documenting every dollar, every favor, every deposit I'd made over the last 5 years. $3,800. Rent help for Luna and Travis during the layoff, $5,000. Dad's retirement penalty reversal, $612. Engagement shoot. Deposit $2,500. Venue deposit. Non-refundable paid from my account. $180. Save the date website. Annual domain plus design $900. Airbnb for bridal party. By the time I was done, the sun had dipped below the skyline. My coffee was still on the counter. Cold, forgotten. I didn't feel petty. I felt prepared. I closed the file and stared at the screensaver glowing faintly across the room. And then I whispered to the stillness. They wanted peace. They can keep it. Without me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset, not anymore. It was something else, something colder, like a wire had been cut inside me, and I could finally stop pretending it wasn't buzzing all these years. I turned off the lights, shut my laptop, and sat in the dark until morning. Not morning, planning. Around 8 a.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I ignored it at first, but then it chimed again. I know things are tense, but could you send me $300 for the flowers? I'm having trouble with my card. Mom. There it was. No. How are you feeling? No. I know things were hard yesterday. Just a straight-up request like nothing happened. Like I hadn't just been told, without hesitation, that I wasn't welcome at my sister's wedding. I stared at the message long enough for the screen to dim. Then I turned the brightness back up, just to screenshot it. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her a response. What I owed myself, finally, was honesty. They didn't care. Not really. Not about what they took, or how often they took it, or how it made me feel like an afterthought who should just smile and write the check. I set the phone down and made myself a cup of coffee. This time, I drank it hot. Mid-morning, I opened the family group chat out of habit. I had no idea why. Maybe part of me was still trying to track the disaster unfolding from afar. But when I tapped the icon, the screen flashed with a small, impersonal message. You are no longer a participant in this conversation. Just like that. Not blocked, not muted, just gone. I tapped again, then went into Luna's profile. Her latest post was already getting dozens of likes. Final fitting done. Can't wait to be surrounded by love. Smiley faces. Hearts. Sandra commented, So proud of you, baby girl. Glenn dropped a thumbs up. Travis's sister posted a string of pink dress emojis. One of Luna's bridesmaids replied, OMG, it's going to be perfect. And there I was, erased, not even worth the courtesy of a heads up, just deleted. You don't accidentally remove someone from a group chat, not when they've been the one organizing vendor files and sharing spreadsheets, not when they've been the one replying to catering emails. You only remove someone like that when you've decided their usefulness has expired. I sat still, staring at the screen, the silence around me almost respectful in its clarity. This wasn't about forgetting. This was intentional. Later that afternoon, I went to the hall closet, pulled down an old cardboard box labeled Luna Grad Party in Sharpie. Inside were receipts, unused invitations, and a photo album I'd made for her as a gift. She never posted about it, never thanked me beyond a quick, looks great. I'd organized the whole event, called vendors, picked a playlist, even cleaned up after half the guests bailed. But the only photos she shared online were of her and her friends. I wasn't in a single one. You only see the sparkle when you don't have to sweep the floor. I sat on the couch with that album on my lap, flipping through pictures of balloons, handwritten cards, and Polaroids that no longer meant anything. Then I stood up, walked it all to the trash chute, and let it go with one smooth drop. That night, I made a new folder on my laptop. I didn't title it Revenge or Receipts at first, just something simple. Evidence. But it didn't stay simple for long. In that folder, I began collecting every piece of documentation, every dollar I'd loaned or given, every email where I was tasked to just take care of it, every message where they guilted me into helping. I found 87 screenshots in my phone alone, 6 spreadsheets, 12 PDFs. I added the PayPal statements and invoices. I saved the WhatsApp voice notes where Luna joked about how I'd pay for anything if they made it sound urgent. I renamed the folder. Enough. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was something more dangerous. Precision. The part of me that had always stayed quiet was now wide awake and sorting files by date. The next morning, I didn't answer the texts, didn't like Luna's post, didn't send the flower money. I started backing everything up to 2 cloud accounts and a secure drive. If they wanted peace, they could have kept it by not turning me into their backup plan. And if they thought I'd just walk away without a sound, they forgot one thing. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means I'm building something stronger. The next morning came without sunlight. The sky hung low and gray, like even the weather wanted to stay quiet around me. I'd barely slept, again, but my mind was sharp, almost unnervingly so. There was no fog, no hesitation, just focus. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the small desk in my bedroom, opening a blank spreadsheet like I was stepping into a courtroom with myself as the only witness, prosecutor, and judge. The title at the top of the document read, Unpaid Debts, Emotional and Financial. I started slow. Wedding website, $245 Airbnb for out-of-town guests, $783. Luna's emergency rent, October, $3,800. Deposit for rehearsal dinner, $1,250. Canva Pro subscription they used, $119. Bridal shower decorations, they never reimbursed, $392. Spa booking for Luna and bridesmaids, $680. It went on. Page after page. No tears, no frustration, just data. Clean, brutal facts. Every time I'd helped without being asked. Every time I'd been asked and didn't hesitate. And every time I'd been dismissed afterward like I'd simply filled my role. By the time I reached line 43, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. I wasn't spiraling. I was documenting. And that meant something. That afternoon my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. Naila, Mom's voice. Calm, too calm. We're having dinner tonight, just family. To talk, no judgment. I hesitated. She added, Luna will be there, and your father. It would mean a lot. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I said, where and when? 6:30, at the house. I showed up in a navy dress shirt and dark jeans. Simple, intentional. I didn't bring anything, not even a notebook, just my presence. If they were going to ambush me, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of thinking I came ready for war. The table was already set when I arrived. Luna and Travis were seated, side by side like magazine models. Clarice and Jerome stood in the corner, whispering. My parents sat at each end like this was some kind of mediation. No one smiled. Thanks for coming, Sandra said as she gestured to the chair left open, the one furthest from Luna. I sat down, folded my hands, waited. It didn't take long. Luna was the first to speak. I just want to say this has all gotten really out of hand. The wedding is supposed to be a happy time, and you've made it uncomfortable. I didn't flinch. I made it uncomfortable? I asked quietly. She looked at me like I'd missed the point. You've been passive-aggressive, not replying to messages, not helping anymore? I didn't respond. Travis jumped in. My family isn't used to conflict. You being involved, your attitude, it's not easy for them. I looked at him evenly. You mean honesty? Clarice stepped forward. We just want everything to be smooth. You're making it harder than it needs to be. No one spoke up for me. Not Dad, not Sandra, not even Jerome, who once told me I was the only person in the family who remembered his birthday. But when Luna started tearing up, the room shifted. Suddenly, Mom was reaching for tissues. Dad put his hand on Luna's shoulder. Travis leaned in and whispered something only she could hear. Clarice glared at me like I'd broken something precious. No one asked why Luna was crying. No one asked what I had gone through. I sat there looking at the plate in front of me, untouched. A salad I didn't order, with a vinaigrette I didn't like. I counted the olives. 6. When the performance ended, I stood up, quietly, no grand speech. As I turned to leave, Dad followed me to the hallway. He didn't say much, never did. But just before I reached the door, he leaned in and said, "You always were too sensitive." I paused. Then I turned to him and said evenly, "And you always were too silent." He didn't reply. I drove home in silence. The streets of Brentwood were empty, washed in the soft yellow of street lamps. No music, no podcasts, just the quiet truth that I'd known all along, but hadn't been brave enough to say out loud. At home, I opened my laptop, clicked open the Enough folder. I created a new draft email and titled it, "Venue Contract, my name on it." I attached the PDF. I saved the email. I didn't send it, not yet, but I would. The next 2 days passed without noise. I didn't hear from my parents. No calls, no attempts to smooth things over. It was as if my silence had made me invisible. Again. On the third morning, I found a small yellow envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no markings, just my name, typed and taped across the front. I knew it wasn't junk. The weight of it felt intentional. Inside were printed screenshots, dozens of them. Not emails, not receipts. These were from a private group chat, one I wasn't supposed to see. Luna. "We'll get him to pay for the cake too. Just guilt him about being the only sibling. Works every time." Clarice. "He's not even invited. Problem solved." Jerome. "Wait, he's still doing the website? That's wild." Luna again. "He's too nice. It's pathetic." And just above all that venom, there was a sticky note in unfamiliar handwriting. "You deserve to see this. T." I didn't need to guess who T was. Only one person had ever called me after I left a family gathering early and said, "You don't deserve what they do to you." Therese, my cousin on Dad's side, always quiet, always watching. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but now she was speaking in the clearest way possible. I stared at the printouts, hands steady, breathing measured. My name wasn't in the chat, not once. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't asked about. I was just the bank account with a pulse, the person they kept on standby until they no longer needed me. I scanned the last screenshot. It was Clarice again. "He's dramatic. I mean, come on. It's not like he's family. And that one stung more than I expected. I walked over to my desk, slid the envelope next to my laptop, and opened a new folder titled Contingency. Then I sent Travis a message. "I received something. I think you should see it." He replied within minutes. "You always twist things. You made my mom uncomfortable from the start." No pause, no curiosity, no, "What is it?" Just blame. Wearing black to brunch? Questioning the flower cost? You never know when to let things go. You always turn stuff into drama, again. I stared at the screen, blinking slowly. I hadn't expected an apology, but I thought, naively, that the proof might spark doubt. Instead, he defaulted to the family line. "You're the problem. You always were." I didn't reply. I grabbed my keys and drove to the grocery store. Not because I needed food. I just needed air, motion, distance from the walls that had been listening to me scream inside for years. I parked under a flickering streetlight and sat there, the engine still humming. In the quiet, I remembered a night 4 years ago when Luna called me crying about her rent being overdue. Travis had just lost his job, and they were 3 months behind. Their landlord had threatened eviction. I wired $3,800 within 10 minutes. No questions asked. Back then, I called it love. Now I realized it was utility. I wasn't family. I was a solution. That was the pattern. I picked up the tab. I absorbed the criticism. I stayed silent. I made things easier for everyone but me. That was done now. Back at home, I printed the screenshots. 3 sets, just in case. 1 in a fireproof folder, 1 in my digital vault, and 1 I kept in a manila envelope under the mattress. Then I opened my email. Rowena. She used to work with me in project compliance. Sharp, skeptical, and just paranoid enough to be effective. She ran a small agency now, digital forensics. Her business motto, truth leaves metadata. I typed 1 line. Still interested in verifying digital evidence? I hit send. No attachments, just the question. It didn't take long for her to reply. Always. What are we burning down? Rowena's message stayed open on my screen for almost an hour. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I was organizing the next move like I was preparing for trial. That night, I sat with my laptop, scrolling through my old PayPal activity. It started as a simple task, categorizing transactions tied to the wedding. But then I saw it, $10,000, for Luna's tuition urgent, sent to my mom's account almost 3 years ago. Back then, she'd called in tears, said they were behind on payments and Luna might have to drop out of school. I wired it without hesitation. No questions, no contracts. Family was family, right? Except something didn't line up. I pulled up the date, August 4th. Then I cross-checked it against public business records. Rowena had taught me how years ago. In a few clicks, I found it. Nimbus Edge LLC. Registered August 9th, members listed. Clarice V., Luna S., Jerome D. Filed through a virtual agent in Franklin, Tennessee. No mention of me. No hint that the seed money for their startup had come from my savings account. The money wasn't for tuition, it was a cover. They lied, and built a company on that lie. I leaned back in my chair and whispered out loud, "They're not just using me, they're laundering my loyalty." Around 10 a.m. the next morning my phone rang, unknown number, but I had a hunch. "Hello?" A pause. Then her voice, smooth, southern, practiced. "Naila, this is Darlene, Travis's mother." I stayed quiet. I just wanted to call because I know tensions have been high, and I think we all want what's best for Luna. Still, I said nothing. She continued. "Look, I know you feel left out, and that's unfortunate. But Luna's in a fragile place right now. Any stress could ruin her big day. So maybe if you could just hold off on anything disruptive?" There it was. I gave a dry, almost amused chuckle. Disruptive? Like being erased from the family? Or just being asked for money after being told not to show up? She hesitated. "We're not trying to exclude you. We're just curating a safe experience for family." That word, curating, as if I were a toxin to be filtered. "Then maybe you should have excluded my money too." A long breath on the other end of the line, then low and cold. "Just don't do anything you'll regret." She hung up before I could reply. I stood in the kitchen, still holding the phone. The audacity of her call didn't even shock me. Not anymore. It confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. I grabbed a pen and a post-it. Wrote one sentence. "No one who benefits from me gets to erase me." I folded it and stuck it above my laptop, just under the Enough folder tab. Then I opened a new email to Rowena. Subject, verified ownership, body. Need your forensic eye on Nimbus Edge. I want to know who's legally liable. While waiting for her response, I went through the company's online presence, their brand voice, their press kit, their investor bios. Clarice listed herself as co-founder. Luna was labeled as strategic growth. Jerome was head of outreach. They'd taken my financial lifeline and built a digital fortress, pretending they'd done it all themselves. I gathered everything. Screenshots, registration docs, tax ID numbers. I printed them. Then I added a clean copy of my PayPal transfer receipt, highlighting the transaction ID and date. I slipped it all into a manila envelope and sealed it with clear tape. On the back, I wrote in Sharpie, Clarice V., open carefully. I walked the 3 blocks to the nearest mailbox, the autumn air dry and sharp against my skin. I slid the envelope through the slot and listened for the soft thunk of it dropping inside. They had one chance to acknowledge the truth quietly. They chose not to. Back in my apartment, I shut the door behind me and let the lock catch. For a second, I didn't move. I just stood there, leaning against the wood like it might hold me up better than my spine could. Outside, the wind kept screaming like it had something urgent to confess, some storm-born truth that could never quite break through glass and concrete. But inside, the silence cut clean. It wasn't peace exactly, more like precision. And that was enough. That was what I needed. I didn't bother taking off my coat. I didn't turn on the lights or put on music or start boiling water like I normally would when trying to soothe a nervous system wired too tight. I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. I wanted control. I walked straight to my desk, powered up the laptop, and opened the wedding dashboard. The loading bar crawled across the screen, then it hit full. The list stared back at me. First up, the florist. They'd sent mood boards and proposal PDFs and 6 different options for peony substitutes, because Clarice said actual peonies were fiscally irresponsible. I'd spent 3 weekends getting the color palette just right: mauve, dusty rose, sage, all for a wedding I no longer recognized, much less belonged to. I hovered over the vendor contract and clicked cancel service. One confirmation later, the arches, the centerpieces, the fake Pinterest magic, they were gone. Next, the photographer. He'd been Luna's find. One of those guys who only shot in natural light and talked a lot about capturing moments of raw emotion. Cancelled. Then, the venue. That goddamn barn. The one Clarice called rustic chic, and Luna said would pop on reels. I'd booked it, under my name, paid the deposit from my account. Added the insurance myself because they didn't have time to worry about the boring stuff. I scrolled to the cancellation option and clicked. A message popped up. Are you sure you want to proceed? I smiled. Just slightly. The kind of smile people give in courtrooms and final acts. Never been more. I chose the insurance refund option. They'd get 90% of their dream wedding back? Technically. But dreams aren't quite as dreamy when someone else has the receipt. When the foundation of your fairy tale is an unpaid invoice in someone else's inbox. I wasn't done. I logged into Canva Next, deleted the wedding signage. Gone were the pastel welcome signs with elegant serif fonts. Gone was the seating chart I spent an entire weekend building after Clarice insisted she wanted a clean UX flow. Gone was the custom-built RSVP site that integrated with her livestream audience's wedding predictions. I deleted it all. Then I renamed the shared wedding planning folder. Ask Clarice for help. I logged out. That could have been enough. That's where a normal person might have stopped, chalked it up to a moral victory and gone to bed. But I'm not a normal person. I opened a second browser window, logged into Nimbus Edge's internal payroll system. Clarice must have forgotten to revoke my admin credentials. She always liked being the face, the brand, the voice. But behind all that, it had been me who wired the structure. Me who set up the permissions and filters and protocols. One oversight on her part. One open door. Her mistake. I scrolled to the pending payroll queue. Friday's batch. Luna, Travis, Clarice, Jerome. I clicked Pause Disbursement. A prompt appeared. Are you performing a temporary freeze for internal audit? Yes. In the memo line I typed, Funds pending review, initiated by NS. I pressed Enter. The second my finger left the key, my phone lit up like a detonated beehive. 5 missed calls from Sandra. Luna's message. What are you doing? This is a disaster. Clarice. This is theft. You'll regret this. Jerome. Are you serious right now? This is illegal. I turned the phone face down. Then I made tea. Chamomile. 4 minutes steeped, stirred in honey. Let the cup rest in my palms. Sat at the kitchen table and listened to the hush between moments. I wasn't panicked, not anxious, no tightness in my chest, no shame in the back of my throat, no whisper of guilt crawling up my spine telling me I'd gone too far. Because for the first time I knew I hadn't. I hadn't overreacted. I had finally acted. Period. As the kettle cooled, I opened the laptop again, but not for deletion this time, for documentation. I typed an email to Rowena. Subject, if they retaliate. Body, we go public. Let me know when files are verified. Send, then another draft. This one to Clarice. No fanfare, no apology, no preamble. This isn't sabotage, this is balance. Send. Above my screen, a yellow post-it note fluttered slightly in the leftover breeze from the window draft. I'd written it months ago, back when things were just starting to fray. No one who benefits from me gets to erase me. And I meant it now more than ever. I had spent years building facades for people who couldn't stand their own reflections, held up mirrors so they could pose in front of them, while I disappeared behind the frame. Not anymore. The files were loaded. The paper trail was clean. The freeze was legal. The leverage was real. And I was done being the architect of someone else's empire of smoke and mirrors. Let them call lawyers. Let them scream. Let them bluff. Let them make their next move. By the time the kettle clicked off and the tea had cooled beside me, Rowena's reply lit up my inbox like a fuse. The subject line read, Clarice V. Metadata match confirmed. There were no long explanations in the email body, just the facts. LinkedIn burner profile, =. Clarissa's home IP plus device ID, MacBook Pro serial ending in 29GF. Timestamp matches your vendor cancellation day. Attached were screenshots of a LinkedIn profile called Wedding Watch TN, a bland-looking account with no real photo, one post, and a whole thread of replies. Every comment under trending vendor ads made jabs like, "Word of advice, don't trust unstable clients who fake generosity." Emotional leverage is not partnership, it's manipulation. Beware of consultants who pretend to support you until they blow it all up. None of them used my name, but they didn't need to. Clarissa's style always had that surgical cruelty, like slicing with a scalpel instead of a machete. Clean, silent, precise. I opened the profile, read through the trail again, and caught the common thread. They were trying to label me dangerous, to finances, to feelings, to reputations. And for the first time since this all began, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. I copied the metadata Rowena had attached, pasted it into a new document labeled Digital Defamation Clarice 5. Then I opened Instagram. The post hit me before I even tapped on it. Luna, standing under fairy lights in what I recognized as the final wedding fitting photo. The caption? "Some people in your family can't stand when it's not about them. That's not love. That's control." She tagged Travis, Clarice, Sandra, Glenn. Not me, of course. I wasn't worth tagging, just worth pointing at. The comments poured in like open applause. "Proud of you for setting boundaries. Let go of the toxic ones, girl. Blood isn't thicker than peace." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even screenshot. I already knew how to save what mattered. I opened a private folder, uploaded the LinkedIn screenshots, Clarissa's registration documents, the PayPal receipt, and now this public post. I typed out the timeline. Burner created May 11th. Payment freeze initiated May 13th. Luna post May 14th. They were moving fast, so I had to move with more precision. I scrolled through the post again, then closed the app. I wasn't going to reply in the comments. That would give them what they wanted, proof that I'd cracked. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. They weaponize silence and perception, so I'll respond with proof. I sat with that thought for a moment. Then I opened my encrypted drive. Inside, every document Rowena had validated, the lawyer-reviewed contracts, screenshots of all unacknowledged expenses, the burner account metadata, the online post slander. I created a zip file, password protected it, and uploaded it to a secure cloud link. Then I sent 3 emails. To my attorney, subject, pattern of targeted defamation body. All files attached. Will need pre-litigation letters if it escalates. To a local reporter who covered family-run tech startups, subject, Nimbus Edge behind the facade body. Curious if you're still doing stories on founders who build on borrowed ground. To my accountant, Jenna, subject, forensic review request, client, Nimbus Edge crossflow. Body. Please begin tracing expense links, especially where company funds and family favors overlap. Each email included the download link. When I hit send on the last one, my phone buzzed again. Blocked number. I let it ring once, twice. Decline. Seconds later. Hope you're proud of what you've started. Unknown. I smiled and powered the phone off completely. They had built their story on quiet exploitation and assumed I'd never gather the words to contradict it. But now, mine was on paper, backed by files, and in the hands of people with printing presses, subpoenas, and spreadsheets. Let them try to spin the story. I just sent mine to people who can print it. The vineyard was the kind of place people posted about. Every corner was designed for a moment that looked effortless, but took hours of planning and 3 Pinterest boards. Fairy lights zigzagged through an open-air pergola like constellations placed by hand. White tablecloths fluttered softly in the breeze, anchored by centerpieces that screamed, "We don't try too hard," even though everyone knew they absolutely did. It was perfect in the way only money and insecurity could create. It was curated perfection, a living photo op, and it made my skin itch. I parked far enough from the main entrance that no one would see me arrive, just a line of hedges between me and the event. 1 breath, 2. I slid the flash drive into the inside pocket of my coat, next to the folder already prepped with documents. Cold metal, warm fabric. I liked the contrast. It grounded me. I stepped onto the crushed gravel path. The crunch beneath my boots didn't match the carefully chosen background music floating from inside the tent. It didn't belong, and neither did I. A few heads turned, uncertain. The maitre d' had just spotted me, his steps quickening toward my direction, likely to ask if I had a reservation. But I kept walking, straight past him. That was the point. No one expected me. And for once, that worked in my favor. Inside the rehearsal dinner tent, the atmosphere was aggressively elegant. Soft jazz floated from a live quartet. Candlelight flickered on crystal wine glasses. There was a rhythm to the evening, laughter in carefully timed bursts, conversations that only dipped so deep before returning to safety. The entire scene was polished to the point of parody. At the head table stood Luna, dressed in champagne satin, surrounded by Sandra, Clarice, and Travis. They looked like a lifestyle ad. They weren't laughing anymore. Their eyes followed me as I crossed the floor. I didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't give them the out of pretending this was just awkward timing. I walked directly to the center table, reached into my coat, pulled out a small black Bluetooth speaker. I set it down on the linen and pressed play. "Excuse me," I said calmly. "No anger, no theatrics, just volume, sharp and deliberate. This will only take a minute." The room quieted. Clarice's voice came first, clear and dripping with disdain. "He'll pay. Just guilt him. He's stupid when he thinks he's helping." Then Travis, with a sneer that sounded like it barely required effort. "She creeps me out. She's always watching like she's about to write you up." And finally, Luna's voice, low and falsely reassuring. "She won't be at the wedding. Trust me, I'll handle it." A wave of gasps rippled through the tent. Plates stilled mid-bite. Forks froze. Sandra's napkin hung limp in her hand. Glenn looked like he'd been shot and didn't know where the bullet came from. And the string quartet, bless them, stopped playing mid-note, bowstrings caught in the air. I stood still. Let the silence afterward ring out longer than the audio itself. Clarice found her voice first. "That's out of context." I turned to face her. "The context is this. You built a business with my investment, my strategy, and my time. You grew your status off my silence, and then you tried to erase me. From the company, from this wedding, from my own family." She opened her mouth, then shut it again. I pulled the folder from my coat next and walked it over to Zach, Travis's best man. More importantly, the only person in this entire circus who wasn't tied to anyone by blood, marriage, or money. Neutral ground. "This is for you." Inside the folder were receipts totaling $11,438.22 transferred from my accounts to Sandra's and Clarice's, categorized as consulting expenses and marketing reimbursements, wire logs dating back 18 months. A screenshot of Clarice forging my digital signature on a business agreement, and a notarized summary from Rowena's firm, verifying the entire chain of digital evidence, time-stamped, IP traced, metadata locked. Behind me, a clear voice spoke. Kristen, standing tall, wearing her corporate badge with just enough visibility. She was real authority in this room. Her calmness was louder than any scream. "Files have been authenticated, metadata verified, this wasn't edited." Clarice went pale. Luna's lips parted, then pressed together. Travis stood, but said nothing, just looked trapped in a conversation his charm couldn't talk him out of. Zach looked down at the folder, then back up. "I'm calling off the wedding," he said, quiet but clear. Then the room imploded. Luna let out a scream, high-pitched, sharp, and real. Nothing curated about it. Sandra finally dropped the napkin and covered her mouth. Clarice spun and stormed out like the tent had burst into flames. Glenn trailed after her, not saying a word. Travis moved to grab Luna's hand, but she slapped it away, her mascara already running. And I didn't wait for applause. I walked back to the coat rack, slipped my hand into my pocket, and turned around one last time. "You didn't want me here," I said. "You made that clear." They stared at me, hollow and stunned. "But what you didn't count on was that I'd stop trying to stay." I paused, then added, just loud enough to echo under the tent. "You wanted me gone. Now you get to keep what's left." I stepped out into the cool vineyard air. The fairy lights behind me flickered. The night pressed in, clean and quiet. I expected footsteps, voices, some dramatic exit chase. But no one followed. No one dared. Because the thing about being underestimated for years, when you finally speak, when you finally act, it's deafening. And they heard me. Every last one of them. Loud and clear. The air outside the vineyard felt cleaner than it had in days. I didn't look back. By the time the moon sank behind the hills, I was already halfway out of Nashville. A duffel bag in the passenger seat, the rest of my life in the trunk. I didn't leave a note. I didn't turn on music. I didn't text a single soul. I crossed the city limits just as the first light of morning broke. The new cottage sat at the edge of Knoxville, near the Smokies. Stone exterior, modest porch, a small attic I didn't need but liked knowing was mine. The landlord had accepted my 6-month lease and cashier's checks. No questions asked. That was the point. No one knew where I was. And I liked it that way. The first thing I did after unlocking the door was turn off my phone. Not just silent. Off. I placed it in a drawer and shut it. That drawer hasn't opened since. Next, I transferred every cent from my public accounts to a private one, changed my passwords, deleted LinkedIn, scrubbed old photos from Instagram, unfollowed every name that echoed too loudly in my chest. I didn't block them. I didn't need to. Their silence had always come first. I was just matching it now. A few days after settling in, I returned to Nashville once, quietly. I left one envelope with the front desk of the wedding venue. Inside, a copy of the final invoice I'd paid. On top, a post-it note written in my best handwriting. Thanks for nothing. No signature. When I got back to Knoxville, a manila envelope sat in my new mailbox. No return address. It was my wedding invitation to Luna's ceremony. Unopened, returned, not refused, not undeliverable, just rejected, like I had been, again and again. I didn't cry. I placed it under the sink with the rest of the paper I planned to burn come winter. A week later, Rowena forwarded me a headline. Tech startup Nimbus Edge under financial audit after anonymous tip. Below it, a subheader. Founder Clarice V. declines to comment. I didn't forward it. I didn't save it. I just read it once and closed the tab. Sandra called again, then Glenn emailed. Subject: we should talk. Please. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to explain. I spent my days differently now. Most mornings, I volunteered at a historical archive on the edge of town, cataloging letters, cleaning dust from postcards written in the 1800s. Stories nobody remembered, but someone had once cared enough to keep. Some afternoons, I made tea and sat on the porch, listened to birds I didn't know the names of, watched the sun trace slow, deliberate lines across my little patch of sky. They didn't know where I lived. They didn't know if I was okay. And for the first time, I was. I didn't need closure from them. I needed peace. And this quiet, unfamiliar life I built alone? It wasn't loud, but it was mine. No one had power over it. No one could touch it. And every silence that used to cut me? Now it felt like a boundary, like breath, like home. This box does not accept apologies. And the silence I hear every day now, it finally sounds like mine. Before I go, let me leave you with this. Sometimes the loudest act of love is choosing yourself. For too long, I mistook loyalty for silence. I believed being the helper made me valuable. But love that requires you to disappear is not love. It's control dressed in tradition. And family that only embraces your sacrifices, but never your boundaries, isn't family. It's an audience. I didn't burn bridges. I built a door. And if you've ever felt like the too much in someone else's story, maybe it's time to write your own. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away from the people you love just to protect the peace inside you? Or maybe you're still standing at that line, wondering if it's okay to leave. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What part of this story hit home? Or just drop a 1 if this made you feel seen. If you didn't like the video, I still want to hear why. Let's keep the conversation real. And if you want more stories like this, raw, honest, and full of heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next, because your voice matters. And sometimes, hearing someone else's story helps you tell your own.
Hi, I'm Darlene. At my own birthday, my sister raised her glass and said, "She still lives off handouts." The whole room laughed, but no one knew my portfolio manager was about to call. On speaker, They thought I was the weak one, the one who never figured it out. But what if I told you they erased me from the family trust, cropped me out of photos, used my money to host the very party where they humiliated me? And still, they smiled like nothing was wrong. So tell me, how do you stay quiet when your own family rewrites your story to fit theirs? The gravel under my heels crunched louder than I expected. I slowed down, adjusted the strap of my purse, and took a deep breath before stepping into the courtyard. The Kane estate was glowing with string lights, polished marble, and the self-importance of old money trying to look casual. My family had always mastered the art of showmanship, but tonight, they perfected erasure. A large welcome board stood at the entrance, etched in cursive gold. Marilee's Charitable Gala, honoring family. I stared at it longer than I should have. My birthday, my money, her name. A valet nodded toward me, hesitating. Miss, are you with catering? I smiled tightly. No, I'm with the family. Inside the foyer, people milled about in curated dresses and well-practiced laughter. My mother floated by in navy satin, the same expression she wore at every fundraiser, gracious, untouchable. A guest leaned in, whispering loudly enough, "Is that Marilee's assistant? Or cousin?" I kept walking. It wasn't worth correcting, not here. Someone passed me a glass of champagne, and I made my way to the edge of the ballroom where the ceiling stretched high with imported chandeliers. Every detail had been chosen to echo taste, prestige, and Marilee's vision. The signature cocktails were labeled after her childhood nicknames. There was even a branded ice sculpture, her initials carved into frozen pride. A tap on my shoulder made me turn. Marilee, in a pearl-sheathed dress, leaned in with that practiced smile. "Dar, you made it! Perfect timing!" She wrapped her arms around me like we were close, like I hadn't funded the whole event and been left out of the program. "I have a little surprise for you later," she said, her voice syrupy. "You've always been special." I don't know what irritated me more, the fakery or the word special, like I was a charity case. After a few rounds of greetings and forced grins, dinner was announced. The ballroom doors opened, revealing long tables decked in candlelight and floral arrangements. My place card was missing. Marilee gestured to the end seat like it was some kind of honor. During dessert, she stood and clinked her glass. "Everyone, if I could have a moment. Tonight, we're not only celebrating family, we're lifting up someone who's always needed a little help and always found her way back." My stomach tightened. She turned toward me. "Darlene, sweet sister, I got you something I think you'll love." A staff member brought over a wrapped package. I opened it slowly. Inside was a gently used leather tote. A flyer for a women's workforce reintegration program peeked from the pocket. "Figured it'd help you get back on your feet," Marilee added. "They have great workshops, confidence building, resume coaching. I hear they even help with interview outfits." Laughter bubbled around the room, uneasy but present. My hands didn't tremble, not visibly, but inside, something tilted. I held the tote by the straps and nodded. "Thank you, that's thoughtful." Marilee smirked, satisfied with the performance. Mother gave an approving nod, as if this was a necessary intervention. I returned to my seat, placed the bag under the table, and pretended not to notice the sideways glances. Later, while people danced and chatted, I slipped away toward the hallway. The slideshow had started. Clips of childhood, family moments, success stories. Marilee at debate tournaments, Marilee accepting awards, Marilee hugging mom. I waited, foolishly, for even one frame of me. Not as background, just once. Instead, a photo flashed where I remembered standing beside my father at his retirement event. In this version, I wasn't in the frame. Cropped, clean. I wandered outside to the garden. The air was cooler, quieter. I leaned against the stone railing, watching lights from the pool ripple across the grass. No one followed, no one noticed. I had paid for this night. Every rental, every tray of appetizers, every curated jazz playlist. But I didn't know I'd bought a stage for my own humiliation. The air outside was crisp, enough to sting the back of my throat. I stood there longer than I should have, not because I needed a break, but because I wasn't sure if I wanted to walk back into that room and pretend any longer. But I did. Eventually. The music had shifted by the time I returned, the kind of jazz that tried too hard to feel sophisticated, but instead sounded like background noise for disappointment. I found my seat again, still at the far end of the table, still nameless. I took one slow sip of champagne, trying to cool the ache in my jaw before it hardened into something permanent. Then merrily stood up. Her fork tapped the rim of her glass twice. The room quieted, not entirely, but enough. She didn't wait for full attention. She never did. She was used to assuming the room belonged to her. "I'd like to take a moment to say something," she began, holding her glass with the posture of a politician mid-campaign. "You know, every family has that one person we carry, don't they?" A few scattered chuckles. "That one sibling who means well, but never quite. Sticks the landing." Her eyes slid toward me, casual, like a blade laid gently across the table. "Some of us build companies. Others, well, some still live off handouts." There was a sharp pause, followed by forced laughter from a few guests who didn't know whether to cringe or clap. Some smiled awkwardly. One woman next to me muttered, "Oh, wow," and reached for her water. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I didn't flinch. I raised my glass to her from across the room, silent, steady, and drank. She wanted a reaction. She wanted the room to know I was small. Instead, I let them watch her tower over me. Because there's something worse than being dismissed. It's watching someone try too hard to look powerful. The rest of the speech blurred. I stopped listening the moment I realized this wasn't about me. It was about her fear that I might no longer be hers to define. A few minutes later, I stepped away. I didn't announce it, didn't ask permission. I walked the long path toward the garden again, but this time I didn't make it outside. I stopped near the open patio door, where the string lights cast enough shadow to hide behind. That's where my mother found me. Glendora moved like always. Quiet heels, composed lips, a scent of something expensive that didn't smell like warmth. She didn't ask if I was okay. She never had. "You didn't have to let her say that," I said softly. Not pleading, just placing it on the table. She adjusted a bracelet on her wrist, tilting her head as if the comment didn't register. "It was a joke, darling." I stared at her. "A joke." She nodded, tone clipped. "Besides, she's not wrong." My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. She kept going. "You've always been fragile, Darlene. Sensitive. You were never built for this world the way Marilee is. She's got direction, drive. She moves things forward. You—" She paused, tilting her head again. "You float." Something in me stopped breathing, but not in a drowning way, in a surfacing way. I could have argued. I could have asked if she remembered who kept the lights on during Dad's surgery, or who wrote the grant that funded her favorite charity's expansion. But I didn't need to prove it. Not to her. Not anymore. I simply said, if staying silent is the price of being family, maybe it's time I start redefining what family means. She blinked at me, not used to resistance, especially not in that voice. I turned, walked down the hallway, and into the nearest restroom to collect myself. Inside, soft lighting and polished marble surrounded me, sterile and curated like everything else in that house. I leaned over the sink and dabbed my lipstick with a tissue. The face that stared back at me wasn't broken, but it wasn't whole either. It was unfinished, in progress, tired of apologizing for becoming something different. "They laughed," I whispered to my reflection. "They clapped. They nodded, as if I should be grateful just to be in the room." I pressed my palms flat against the counter, steadied my breath, and stood up straighter. There were no tears, no monologue, just a choice not to shrink anymore. Let them laugh. I've already paid for the microphone. I stepped out of the powder room, still adjusting the strap of my dress at the shoulder, still deciding whether I wanted to stay. The hallway was quiet now. the clink of glasses and buzz of small talk fading just beyond the archway. It gave me time to breathe, to recalibrate. I didn't go back to the ballroom right away. Instead, I drifted through the west corridor, passing familiar portraits of unfamiliar truths. That hallway had always bothered me. The family wall, as Mother called it, framed evidence of worthiness: weddings, award ceremonies, society galas. The images weren't just curated, they were editorial, and in almost every frame, merrily stood in the center, polished and celebrated. I stopped in front of one I hadn't seen in years, a gala from our father's final year at the firm. I remembered the night clearly. I had flown in from San Francisco, changed in the back of a taxi, and still made it in time to stand beside him during his retirement toast. I even remembered what I wore: a navy pantsuit and flats, because I hadn't had time for heels. In this version of the photo, I wasn't there. I took a step closer. My father stood smiling, merrily at his right, Mother just behind. The space where I should have been, gone, cropped, rebalanced, erased like I had never shown up at all. I didn't feel angry, not anymore. What I felt was weightless, like a ghost who had shown up to haunt her own life. A small voice piped up beside me. "Aunt Darlene, were you not invited to that party?" I turned slightly. It was Eleanor's daughter, Harper, maybe 8 or 9. Her fingers were sticky with frosting, eyes wide and genuinely curious. "I was there," I said with a soft smile. "But not everyone sees the same story." She looked back at the photo. "That's not fair." I crouched to her level. "No, it's not. But it helps me remember who really matters, who should be in the picture." She nodded, like she understood more than most adults in the house ever had. I stood and kept moving, my heels muffled by the thick runner. It didn't take long before I reached the edge of the kitchen entrance, where a staff member asked if I needed anything. I shook my head and slipped out to the side hall, past the linen closet, and into the small study off the guest wing. 2 weeks ago, I'd sat in a very different office. That day, it had rained. The kind of spring rain that doesn't cleanse anything, just soaks through your coat and makes traffic miserable. I had met with Jonathan, the family's longtime estate attorney, to finalize quarterly adjustments for the foundation's reinvestment structure. We had worked together for years. As he flipped through the file, his voice softened. "You should be aware. The revised family trust doesn't list you anymore." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" He cleared his throat. "Your name was removed. Glendora requested it last summer. Said you weren't in a position to manage long-term estate responsibilities." There had been no warning, no conversation, just a silent decision that I no longer qualified. I didn't cry then either. I just closed the folder and nodded once. "I see," I said. "Well, good thing I've been building my own." I thought about that now, standing in the study, the contrast of that sterile law office with this ornate, over-perfumed house. They edited me out of a photo, then a trust. Eventually, they'd probably rewrite family history, so I was never part of it at all. But maybe that wasn't entirely bad. I walked back toward the party, not with bitterness, but with an unfamiliar clarity. The air felt different. Or maybe I did. They had always treated the Kane name like a gate. You earned it by compliance, by staying quiet, by fitting the frame. But I had stopped fitting a long time ago, and I had no interest in getting back inside. I passed Glendora talking to a banker in the corner, her voice bright and well-practiced. Marilee was being photographed with donors near the champagne fountain, tilting her head at that exact angle she knew played well in press releases. I didn't interrupt them. I didn't need to. What I'd built couldn't be cropped, or edited, or conveniently left out of the family slideshow. It didn't need their stamp. It had mine. I didn't need the name. I built something they can't redact. I moved through the dining room just as the servers began clearing empty dessert plates. The scent of caramel and espresso still lingered, faintly masking the bitter edge of everything else. I kept my head high, not because I felt strong, but because I refused to let anyone here see anything they could twist into weakness. The lights dimmed again, and I knew what was coming. A projector flickered on near the dance floor, illuminating a large white wall that moments earlier had been covered in hand-painted ivy. A journey of strength. The Dunch Cane women appeared in gold script, glowing like something sacred. I took a seat near the back, close enough to see, far enough to be forgotten. The first image was a childhood shot of Marilee, front and center at a school spelling bee. She was maybe 7, holding a trophy half her size. The next few slides followed the same rhythm. Marilee volunteering, Marilee graduating, Marilee shaking hands with local council members. Each photo was crisp, posed, and perfectly lit. Then came Glendora, graceful in her tailored suits, standing beside charity banners and speaking at podiums. Eventually, I showed up. Except, not really. In one photo, I was slumped in a hospital bed after minor surgery, Marilee smiling beside me like a concerned guardian. Another slide showed me, years younger, standing behind my sister while she held an award. My hands awkwardly cropped at the edges of the frame. A voiceover began, warm and sentimental. Every strong woman stands on the shoulders of the one who held her through weakness. Our family thrives because we lift each other. The message was clear. Marilee was the one doing the lifting. I was the one being carried. A few people turned to glance at me, subtle, but I saw it. A silent, shared expression. Sympathy, pity, a little confusion. Like they were rethinking everything they'd ever assumed about me, which would have been great if it had come from truth and not fabrication. The lights came back on to a round of soft clapping. Not for me, never for me. Just as I was about to rise, Glendora appeared at my side. Her smile was polite, polished, too clean. "I thought you might appreciate this," she said, pressing a cream-colored envelope into my hand. "It's just something helpful. You've always been my most emotionally intuitive girl." I opened it slowly. A prepaid certificate for a weekend women's retreat in Vermont. Emotional wellness, trauma healing, leadership workshops. I didn't look at her right away. I just stared at the card, absorbing every implication it carried. "You think I'm broken?" Glendora's expression didn't change. She tilted her head slightly, voice gentle. "Not broken, just unfinished." I folded the envelope carefully and returned it to her outstretched hand. "Thank you," I said, "but I'll pass." She blinked. "Darling, it's not a judgment." "Of course not," I replied, stepping past her. "You just paid someone else to deliver it." The music had returned to its earlier rhythm. Soft jazz, politely forgettable. Across the room, Marilee stood near the mic again, offering her closing remarks with just the right mix of sentimentality and showmanship. As people raised their glasses to toast the legacy of powerful women, I slipped into the side hall. They could have their performance. I had already lived the reality. Somewhere along the corridor, I paused. The hush of the hallway, the muted footsteps behind closed doors. It was all suddenly clearer than anything said over a microphone tonight. I pulled out my phone, opened the email draft I had started earlier that week. The subject line still read, "If I ever have to explain myself." I stared at the blank body of the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I hit save and locked the screen. I used to think they misunderstood me, misread my silence, my distance, my refusal to play along. But now I saw it for what it really was. They needed me diminished, easier to carry than to confront. They needed me small to feel big. The last of the applause faded as I returned to my table, my steps measured, deliberate. The lights stayed low for a moment longer, long enough for me to reclaim my seat without attracting attention. I sipped the last of my champagne, letting the bubbles sting. Across the room, people leaned in toward one another, already pivoting to their next topic. Networking, foundation grants, vacation homes. And then Eva appeared beside me. Eva Townsend, someone I hadn't spoken to since college, not really. She leaned in close, as if sharing a harmless secret. "I don't mean to be rude," she whispered, her voice honeyed with the kind of fake concern that never lands well. "But I heard you've been on unemployment?" Merrily said something at the alumni brunch, said you were still trying to figure things out. My gaze slid to hers, calm, flat. I didn't rush the answer. Instead, I smiled, tipped my glass ever so slightly, and asked quietly, "Did she mention who signs her foundation's back-end checks?" Eva blinked. She straightened, mumbled something about needing to find her husband, and didn't speak to me again for the rest of the evening. I didn't mind. The lights dimmed once more, this time for what they announced as a final tribute to the next generation. I knew what was coming. Another slideshow, another carefully curated narrative. On screen, the title card glowed in bold serif letters, "The Next Generation of Kane Women." A soundtrack of soft piano trickled through hidden speakers. The first slide featured Marilee, again, at a leadership summit. Then her posing with Glendora at a Women in Business luncheon. More photos followed, smiling with politicians, cutting ribbons at charity events, mentoring interns like she invented the word. And then, me. Just one photo. Grainy, overexposed, clearly 5 or 6 years old. I remembered the dress because I'd donated it right after that evening. The caption beneath the image read, "Still discovering her path. We're proud of her perseverance." No mention of what I'd actually done. No nod to anything real. Around me, a few people shifted uncomfortably. A whisper behind me cut through the soundtrack. Did she ever even finish Columbia? I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The whole point of the slide was to invite doubt, to paint me as a puzzle never solved, a story without a real ending. The music swelled. The screen faded. A polite clap followed. I stood. Not quickly, not with flair, but with intention. I crossed the room, bypassing the caterers, ignoring Glendora's subtle shake of her head from the corner. I walked straight to Marilee, who stood near the dessert table, all charm and poise and false modesty. She saw me coming, and for a moment, I saw it flicker, the recognition that I wasn't playing anymore. "You can lie all you want," I said, my voice low but firm, "but you might want to double-check who underwrites your silent partners before spinning your next story." Marilee's smile barely faltered. "Darlene, don't be dramatic. It was lighthearted." I stepped a fraction closer. "You think this is light? Keep pushing. Next time, I won't be quiet. I'll show you the weight of what I've built, publicly." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, past the marble pillars and servers and gold-rimmed glasses. As I passed the grand piano, I paused for just a moment, watching a man in a tux awkwardly fumble through the keys. Offbeat, out of rhythm, exactly how this family felt now. I pulled my phone from my clutch, opened the Notes app, and added one line under the email draft I had left open earlier. "They need the illusion. I only need the truth." Just as I tucked my phone away, the lights in the ballroom dimmed again. A soft chime rang out. Glendora's cue for a champagne toast. I knew the rhythm by heart. This was her favorite part of any event. The clink of crystal, the soft lift of a glass, and the perfectly timed anecdote that made her sound charitable without revealing anything true. I hesitated at the threshold, debating whether to return to my seat or let the night continue without me. But something in me didn't want to hide anymore. Not after what I'd just said to Marilee. So I stepped inside. The servers moved gracefully between tables, pouring the last round of bubbles. The piano player resumed his soft melody. And just as Glendora raised her glass with rehearsed grace, my phone vibrated again inside my clutch. I fished it out instinctively, glancing at the screen. It was Camden. Before I could silence the call, I heard his voice, clear, steady, and devastating, echoing across the entire ballroom. The overhead speakers crackled once, then came alive with his words. "Hi, Darlene. Just confirming the $12.4 million rollover into the new fund. Your allocation strategy looks rock solid. I'll lock the ESG side this afternoon. Every chair froze. Every hand paused mid-toast. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered near the dessert cart, the sound piercing through the awkward silence like a warning shot. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The room had already turned. All eyes were on me, including Marilee's, her expression flickering between disbelief and something far more dangerous: exposure. I waited 3 seconds, long enough to feel it land, then walked slowly toward the main table. No rush, no drama. When I reached Marilee, I slid an envelope across the table. She stared at it like it might bite. She opened it carefully. Inside, a detailed invoice. Venue rental, paid. Full catering, paid. Lighting and decor, paid. Live music, valet staff, floral arrangements, line by line, each one itemized and stamped as processed from my own holding company's private ledger. Paid in full. Quietly. Weeks ago. Enjoy the evening, I said, addressing no one in particular. The house is on me. And I left. The hallway felt different now, lighter, less like something I needed to escape from, and more like a place I'd just stopped apologizing for occupying. I moved toward the garden again, slipping past the portraits and candlelight without a second glance. Outside, the night had settled. The air was cooler. I could hear the faint hum of murmurs starting to bubble behind me, the kind of noise that meant something had cracked, and no one knew quite how to seal it back up. My phone buzzed again. A text from Camden. Didn't realize the mic was still synced. Want me to call back? I smiled. Perfect timing. You said it better than I ever could. I looked out over the manicured hedges and the flickering string lights that had once made this place feel like a fairy tale. Now they just looked like theater dressing. In the silence, I felt the shift. Not just in them, but in me. The laughter had stopped. The clapping had faded. And for the first time, perception wasn't something they could control with polished photos and strategic seating charts. Let them talk. The truth just took the mic. I left the garden just after 10. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had kicked off my shoes, peeled off my earrings, and was halfway through wiping off my mascara when my phone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. At first, I thought it was Camden checking in. But when I picked it up, the notifications didn't stop. Mentions, tags, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I tapped into one of the links, still sitting in front of the bathroom mirror in my slip. The video had been uploaded barely 40 minutes earlier, shot vertically from across the ballroom. It was grainy, a little shaky, but the audio came through perfectly. Marilee, standing with her glass raised. Some of us build empires, others still live off handouts. Laughter, applause. Then silence as Camden's voice took over the speakers. Hi, Darlene. Just confirming the 12.4 million rollover into the new fund. I watched myself blink in the video, not flinch. Just stand there, stone still. At the bottom corner of the screen, someone had added a caption in bold white font. Birthday ambush. The view count was already at 312,000. Within the next hour, it hit 1.8 million. I kept scrolling. Y'all, this woman paid for the whole party and got dragged like a stranger. That's not teasing. That's financial gaslighting. Rich families love to humiliate the kid they can't control. She's not the problem. She's the mirror they don't want to look into. For the first time all night, I exhaled. I didn't post. I didn't comment. I didn't even like any of it. I just watched. And the internet did what it does best. Connects dots faster than any family can scramble. The next morning, while I was nursing a quiet coffee by the window, the emails started rolling in. Not from strangers. From names I recognized. Old friends, former coworkers, even 2 exes. I had no idea. If I ever laughed at a story they told about you, I'm sorry. Wow, that video hit different. I didn't answer any of them, because the truth wasn't new. It was just louder now. By noon, Glendora had released a carefully worded statement to the local paper. Private family moments taken out of context should not become public spectacle. We love all of our children equally. Of course she did. Marilee posted a short video to her foundation's page, wearing a blazer and just enough makeup to look relatable. We support Darlene's journey and always have. Families tease each other. It's how we show love. I'm heartbroken this was misconstrued. The comments weren't kind. You didn't tease, you embarrassed. Imagine building your empowerment brand on someone else's back. This is why women don't speak up in families like yours. I watched it all unfold from my balcony that evening. The sun dipped over the Hudson, lighting the river in streaks of copper and gold. The wind moved slow, steady, like it had time. I sat there with a blanket over my knees, a cup of mint tea in my hand, and let the buzz play in the distance. I didn't need to defend myself. They had told on themselves. Glendora's statement got picked apart on a podcast by a woman who had been disowned for marrying outside her race. Marilee's foundation page lost thousands of followers overnight. A major brand partnership disappeared before the weekend ended. Someone even unearthed an old article where Marilee took credit for a business idea I had floated to her years ago. I hadn't thought about that in forever, but the receipts were still there, in emails, timestamps, drafts. The internet doesn't forget. I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat, I didn't even smile. I just let it burn, because for the first time, I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to soften the edges of the story to make it palatable. They wanted to control how I was seen. I let the truth do the seeing instead. I ignored the interview requests, the DM offers from women-centered publications asking for exclusives, the podcast invites, the morning show angles. I wasn't interested in making this a spectacle. That had been their specialty. I had work to do. Quiet work. Real work. By the time Thursday came around, Marilee had been dropped from a major campaign tied to women in tech. The press release didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Glendora stepped down from her board position to spend more time with family. No one asked which family she meant. And me? I deleted the draft email I'd held onto for months, the one titled, "If I ever have to explain myself." I didn't take them down. They collapsed under their own weight. The morning after everything unraveled, I was already halfway through my second cup of black coffee when the screen lit up with a headline I hadn't expected to see so soon. Mysterious CEO behind disruptive fintech revealed. Meet Darlene Scov. The news segment played on every major finance network, one after the other. The anchors repeated my name with that same mix of fascination and hesitancy people use when they realize they've underestimated someone. They showed footage of me walking out of the JP Morgan headquarters earlier that week. The camera angle wasn't flattering. I wasn't posing. I wasn't smiling. I was simply leaving a meeting, coat slung over my shoulder, folder in hand, earbuds still in. Just doing business. But suddenly, that simple image was revolutionary. The anchor continued. She's been quietly funding major shifts in the fintech landscape. And, perhaps most unexpectedly, she also funded the infamous birthday party where she was publicly shamed by her own sister. I watched, not because I needed validation, but because I wanted to see how it felt. And honestly, it felt quiet. It felt done. Screenshots of the Jataum birthday ambush clip flashed next to my corporate headshot. My resume filled the lower third. Stanford alum, private capital strategist, founder of Haven Equity. There was no mention of Marilee, no quote from Glendora. For once, I existed in a story without being edited into the background. By noon, the headlines had changed their tone entirely. Words like dignity, strategic, and poised were now being used to describe me. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I just closed the laptop and went about my day. Later that evening, I received a forwarded link from a colleague. Marilee had made an appearance at a public fundraiser in Soho. She arrived on the arm of Nate Carlisle, my ex, a man I had once seriously considered marrying, back before he became more interested in hedge fund PR than anything real. The tabloid caption read, "Marilee Dunch finds love amid controversy." The photo showed her laughing too hard at something he'd said. Her arm wrapped just tightly enough around his to make a point. A few sources leaked that she had personally arranged the date, that it had been set up specifically for the photographers waiting outside. A desperate move to seem unfazed, to reclaim power through illusion. I didn't feel betrayed. Not really. Nate and I had ended years ago, and if his ambition aligned with her vanity, they were probably perfect for each other. But it was Glendora's move that hit lower. She gave a quote to a legacy magazine the next day. "All families argue. Darlene was always the more sensitive one. She just didn't like being teased." Teased. As if my erasure had been a game. As if I hadn't been erased at all, but had simply refused to laugh along. I didn't issue a response. I didn't do interviews. I didn't hold press conferences. Instead, I called my assistant and told her to release the internal report we'd been refining for weeks. It included the full funding structure of Haven Equity, every stakeholder, every dollar traced, every policy linked to public access, transparency, and female-led capital reallocation. Then I wrote one line. I sent it to Bloomberg. My work has always spoken louder than I ever needed to. This moment is no different. No hashtags, no photos, no link in bio. Just clarity. I also finalized something else that afternoon. A new foundation. One designed specifically to fund women rebuilding their lives after being pushed out. By families, by institutions, by silence. I named it after my grandmother. The only woman in the Kane line who had ever seen me without agenda. Not my mother, not merrily. And I didn't dedicate the foundation with a speech or a gala. I did it with a wire transfer, a statement of purpose, and a promise to never use another woman's pain as decoration for my own image. They played games with masks. I built something that didn't require one. 2 weeks later, I stood in the back corner of a community center in Beacon, sipping weak coffee from a paper cup, watching kids scurry around folding chairs like they were part of an obstacle course. No gala gowns, no hors d'oeuvres passed on silver trays, just cracked tile floors, warm light, and the unmistakable sound of people showing up because they cared, not because a camera might catch it. A volunteer handed me a stack of pamphlets for the Foundation's first public meet and greet. I nodded, thanked her, and tucked them into a canvas tote. A few women who had benefited from our first round of grants spoke at the front of the room. Raw, unrehearsed stories about leaving abusive homes, re-entering the workforce, fighting for custody, rebuilding. One woman held her toddler on her hip the entire time, and no one minded. In fact, they leaned in closer. That was the moment a girl, no older than 9, walked up and tugged gently at the hem of my coat. She had a jelly stain on her shirt and a program clutched in her hands. Her hair was braided tightly, like someone had taken their time that morning. "Miss Scov?" she asked, shy but curious. I crouched to meet her eyes. "Yes?" She held up the brochure. "You were in here. You look important." I smiled. "Well, sometimes I am." She hesitated, then asked the kind of question only a child dares to ask so plainly. "Were you ever sad when people said you weren't smart or good at stuff?" I wasn't ready for it, but I didn't flinch. I took a breath, then answered honestly. "I wasn't sad because they said it," I told her. "I was sad because, for a long time, I believed them." She looked at me for a second longer, then leaned forward and gave me the smallest, fiercest hug I'd received in years. "You look like a superhero now," she said, before running off to rejoin the other kids near the snack table. I stayed where I was, staring at the space she'd just left. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't headline-worthy. It was real. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, peeling an orange while the evening news murmured softly from the TV in the next room. "Marilee Dunch," the anchor said, has officially stepped down from her position as head of Empower Forward, following months of public pressure and internal restructuring. No montage, no tribute, just a sentence, factual and final. Another segment followed. this time about Glendora. She had taken a leave of absence to focus on her health and family. There were no interviews, no farewell op-eds, just quiet. A week after that, a card arrived in the mail. No return address. Just 6 words in handwriting I'd seen my entire life. You were never supposed to win. No signature, no threats. But I knew exactly who wrote it. I folded the card once, placed it in the same drawer where I kept my grandmother's recipe book and the last birthday card she ever wrote me. There was no rage in me, no satisfaction either, just understanding. I went for a walk that evening, down by the river. It was chilly, but not bitter. I passed a few joggers, couples walking dogs, a group of teens laughing too loud for the space they were in. I kept my hands in my pockets, my scarf tight around my neck. I stopped at the same bench where, 3 years earlier, I'd nearly quit everything. I had sat there with an unopened job rejection email, a drained bank account, and no plan. I had stared at the water then, thinking maybe my family was right, that I wasn't built for this world. Now I looked out at the same river and saw something different. Not redemption, not revenge, but proof. Proof that silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't demand applause or headlines. It arrives in tiny, private victories, a full fridge, a rent check mailed on time, a foundation launched without a press release, a girl asking you, without hesitation, if you'd ever felt small, and believing you when you say you did. Back home, I opened my laptop. The old draft was still there. If I ever have to explain myself. I deleted it, then opened a new one. To future me. First line, we didn't break. We became. They tried to erase me from their story, so I wrote my own. Hi, I'm Lorianne. At my mother's funeral, my sister stood at the podium and called herself the only daughter, while I sat in the back, not even listed in the program. A week later, she showed up at my door, asking for money, after taking everything. But it didn't stop there. She forged documents, tried to sell the house, told the world I abandoned our mother when I was the one who held her hand the night she died. What happens when the person who shares your blood rewrites your place in the family? And what do you do when silence is no longer protection, but permission? They said the service would begin at noon, but I was there by 10. I didn't want to run into Delphine before I had to. The parking lot was still mostly empty when I pulled in, the sky over Fresno already starting to sweat. I sat in my car longer than I should have, staring at the chapel doors. The air conditioning hummed in the background, steady and disinterested. I had worn the same navy suit I used to wear when I pitched to clients back in San Diego. I hadn't buttoned it in months. It felt stiff now, like armor that had stopped fitting me the moment I decided to give up that life and take care of Mom. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the welcome board. In loving memory of Maureen Greaves, remembered by her beloved daughter, Delphine Caro. That was it. No mention of me. No, survived by both daughters. Just her. I stood there for a beat too long. The woman setting up flowers asked if I was the florist. I said nothing and walked past. The chapel was quiet, except for the shuffle of programs being laid on chairs. I grabbed one. Front cover, Mom's photo from 10 years ago, the one Delphine insisted on. Inside, under family acknowledgments, it read, survived by her eldest daughter, Delphine Caro, and her devoted caregiver, Lorianne Blythe. Caregiver. Not daughter, not even youngest daughter, just caregiver. My fingers clenched the edge of the paper. I felt something between embarrassment and disbelief crawl up my throat. A whisper behind me. 2 women, older, dressed in beige. Is that the nurse? No, I think she's the one who helped out. Not family, though. I didn't turn around. I folded the program once, then again, and slipped it into my purse without looking. People began arriving in clusters. Hugs, murmurs, the same tired condolences. She was a saint. She'll be missed. Such a strong woman. Most of them looked past me like I was part of the staff. Some nodded, unsure whether to say hello. At exactly noon, Delphine stepped up to the pulpit. Her dress was black but fashionable, expensive looking, too fitted for mourning. Her mascara already ran slightly, as if she'd practiced the smudge. She cleared her throat like she was about to accept an award. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice just shaky enough to sound believable. "Our mother, my mother, was the most loyal, most loving woman I've ever known. She gave everything for this family. She was my best friend." I stood in the back, near the wall, arms crossed tightly. Not once did her eyes meet mine. No one asked if I wanted to speak. There wasn't a slot for me on the program anyway. Delphine continued. "She told me, just a few weeks before she passed, that I was her rock, that I made her proud every single day." I could almost hear her rehearsing those lines in her bathroom mirror. The audience nodded. A few sniffles echoed down the pews. Someone even clapped once before stopping themselves. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that held a spoon to Mom's mouth when she couldn't lift a fork. The same hands that changed her bedding at 3 a.m. The same ones that signed her hospice documents when no one else would. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I walked calmly out the side aisle and into the empty hallway. My heels clicked against the tile with every step, but nobody noticed. I found a bench by the restroom door and sat. My palms were still open in my lap, fingers curled slightly, like they were remembering how it felt to hold hers during her last breath. I thought about the night she passed, how I stayed up with her till morning, how Delphine didn't even call until noon the next day. I didn't expect gratitude. Not really. But I didn't expect erasure either. After a while, I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked back into the chapel just as the slideshow started. Delphine had selected the photos, Mom's birthdays, holidays, vacations, but not a single one with me. If I was in the background, I was cropped. If I was smiling, the frame ended just before my shoulder. There she was, our mother, smiling on screen next to Delphine in picture after picture. A curated history, a version of our family where I didn't exist. And yet, there I was, alive, breathing, watching it unfold like I'd wandered into someone else's life. They clapped when the slideshow ended. Not a standing ovation, but enough. Enough for her. She erased me in front of a room full of people, and they clapped. The applause still rang faintly in my ears as I stepped into the guest hall. The lights here were dimmer, warmer. A shallow hum of conversation floated above the soft instrumental jazz, playing from a Bluetooth speaker someone had stashed near the gift table. Round tables were dressed in off-white linen, small plates of finger food arranged neatly. I knew every detail because I had paid for every last piece of it, down to the lemon wedges beside the iced tea. I wasn't in the room more than 2 minutes before the first woman, an aunt from my father's side, I think, wrapped me in a quick hug and said, "You must be Delphine's friend, right? You did such a beautiful job helping out." Helping out. I gave her a tight smile and nodded. I didn't correct her. By the third hug and fourth person calling me such a kind volunteer, I realized Delphine had made sure I'd be remembered the way she wanted me remembered, if at all. She'd always been clever about that. Let people think what they want, as long as she laid the breadcrumbs. Near the dessert table, 2 older cousins I barely recognized were chatting. "Delphine's been incredible," one said, picking at a deviled egg. "She told me she covered everything, flowers, food, even the chapel fee. That must have cost her a fortune." The other shook her head, mouth half full. "She's always been the responsible one. Remember how she planned Grandpa's 70th? Girl doesn't play around." I stayed behind a display of roses until their voices faded. My fingers curled around the clutch bag I held, nails digging in through the fabric. I didn't need to look at my banking app. I already knew the final number, $15,168. No one else had paid a dime. Delphine hadn't held a job in almost 3 years. I moved toward the tribute table. The centerpiece was a framed photograph propped up by a brass easel, one I hadn't seen before. It was Mom's last birthday. I'd taken the picture myself. I stepped closer. She and Delphine were seated side by side, smiling. The cake sat in front of them, candles still lit. But something was off. I wasn't there. I remembered that night clearly. I sat across from them. I took the picture on my phone. I should have been visible in the mirror behind them, but in this version, the mirror was just reflectionless glare. I leaned in. The crop was precise, clean. I hadn't just been cut. I'd been replaced by blank space. She edited me out, I said under my breath. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel grief. I didn't even feel sad. I felt cold. I turned and made my way across the room. Delphine stood near the wine table, surrounded by a cluster of guests, all smiling too much. Her voice was light, like she didn't have a care in the world. As I passed behind her, I paused just long enough to say, without looking at her, "Nice edit. Really subtle." She didn't turn, just lifted her glass, took a sip, and said, "Some of us were meant to be remembered." There it was again, that tone. Like she wasn't just claiming space, she was reclaiming history. I didn't reply. Not there. Not in front of everyone. I kept walking until I found the corner by the windows, away from the buzz and the soft music and the pretend morning. I looked out at the garden where they'd planted a new dogwood tree in Mom's honor. Delphine had ordered the plaque. It read, "In memory of Maureen Greaves, loved deeply by her daughter Delphine." Just Delphine. She didn't just steal the spotlight. She erased my place in the family story. After the last of the guests trickled out, I found myself in the back hallway again, my shoes finally silent against the carpet. The reception was over, but my mind wouldn't stop pacing. That final insult, her name on the plaque, just hers, clung to me like smoke. It wasn't about sharing the moment. It was about being deliberately left out of it. I sat in the guest lounge beside the chapel, where the flowers had been gathered up and the last tray of sandwiches sat wilting. The air felt different there, less performative, more still. I pulled my phone from my purse, not to scroll, but to open the image I'd been keeping. A photo of a page, really. Mom's hospice schedule. My name filled every line. And in the middle of that page, there was Delphine's name, once, crossed out in my mother's own handwriting. I let my finger rest on that mark for a few seconds. Then, I looked up at the ceiling and closed my eyes. 3 weeks earlier, the house had been quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that carried weight. It was late, maybe close to 1 in the morning, when I heard her voice. Faint, like it barely cleared her lips. "Lo?" I was in the kitchen, still in my robe, stirring soup over the stove. I'd made a habit of prepping something warm for her in the middle of the night. She couldn't eat much, but the ritual mattered. It helped us both pretend the end wasn't quite here yet. I set the ladle down, wiped my hands on the towel at my hip, and walked down the hallway. The house creaked gently with age, as if holding its breath. She was propped up on the adjustable bed, the lamp casting a soft yellow pool across her frail frame. Her eyes were clearer than usual, but her skin looked thinner somehow, more transparent. "I didn't think you were awake," I said gently. "I can't sleep." She smiled weakly. "My thoughts are louder than the oxygen machine." I pulled the blanket up around her shoulders and sat beside her. Her hand reached for mine, fingers cold, unsteady. "I've been thinking," she said, voice almost brittle, "about how I raised you two, and where I got it wrong." "You don't need to go into all that now, Mom." "I do, because you need to hear it from me, not through court papers." She squeezed my hand, or tried to. "I let Delphine talk louder than you ever cried. I believed what I wanted to believe about her, that she was struggling, not selfish, that she meant well, even when she didn't show up. I didn't say anything, not yet. I let her keep going. I changed the will, a couple of months ago. Constance helped me file everything. It's legal, final." Her eyes flicked up, searching mine. "You're the only one who showed up, Lo, not just at the end. You were here for all the hard parts. You saw me when I wasn't anything close to strong or proud. That's what matters. not who I gave birth to first, not who posted more photos online. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with acknowledgement. I reached for the washcloth I kept on her nightstand and pressed it gently against her forehead. She closed her eyes under the pressure. I wasn't here for the will, I murmured, or for some grand gesture. I was here because I remember you used to make cinnamon toast when I had fevers. You'd bring it to my bed with ginger ale and sit with me till I fell asleep. She opened her eyes again, glassy now. I wasn't always good to you, she whispered, but I see you now. I need you to promise me something. Okay. Promise me you won't let her rewrite this. Not the will, not the truth. Don't let her make me a liar when I'm gone. My throat tightened, but I nodded. I won't let her erase you either. She nodded back. Her hand rested in mine a while longer, her breath slowing. When I finally left the room to grab her soup, she had already drifted off. She never finished that bowl. It stayed on the nightstand until the next morning, untouched. Back in the guest lounge, present day again, I folded the photo of the hospice schedule and placed it carefully back into my wallet. I ran my fingers over the worn edges. She promised she wouldn't let her be erased, and now, neither will I. The morning after the funeral, I poured my second cup of coffee before the first had cooled. The house was quiet. Too quiet for someone who'd just buried her mother and hosted 70 guests who barely remembered her name. My inbox was full of payment confirmations, floral invoices, and a thank you note template the funeral home had auto-generated with Delphine's name pre-filled. Of course it was. I was sitting at my desk going through receipts when I heard a knock on the door. Not a buzz or a doorbell chime, just 3 firm raps. That rhythm that says, I didn't call first because I don't care. I stood slowly, the weight in my chest already telling me who it was. I opened the door, and there she was. Sunglasses, no makeup. Hair pulled back carelessly like she'd rolled out of bed and decided not to try too hard. A weathered hoodie hung off her shoulders, sleeves pushed up like she wanted me to think she'd been working. She hadn't. Can we talk? She said, voice low, like she was the one walking on eggshells. I didn't invite her in, just leaned my shoulder against the doorframe and waited. She cleared her throat. I've been thinking. Look, you got the will, you got everything. I got nothing, not even Mom's jewelry. You know that wasn't fair. I didn't blink. She kept going. All I'm asking is a little help with rent. You've got your online store, your savings. Mom gave you the house. I'm not trying to fight, okay? I'm in a tight spot. You mean the spot you made for yourself? I asked, flat. Her mouth tightened. You think I deserve this? Really? After everything? I didn't respond. She took my silence as permission to keep digging. I mean, Mom never said you were perfect. She told me plenty of times you were cold, controlling, hard to love. You think this little Florence Nightingale routine makes up for how you've always looked down on me? I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me, so we stood face to face. You came to my door after stealing my name, my credit, and my grief. You think asking for money erases that? She raised her chin. I just thought you'd be decent enough to remember we're family. I folded my arms. You remembered that too late. She scoffed. You really think Mom would have wanted this? Us like this? You keeping everything while I beg for scraps? She didn't want this. That's why she changed the will. Delphine's jaw clenched. You think that makes you the hero? No, but it makes me the one who showed up. That was the end of it. She turned without another word and walked off my porch like she hadn't just torn open the ugliest parts of our past. 2 days later, she texted, I'll be at Brit Cafe at noon, if you change your mind. I went. It was a neutral place, not far from downtown. I picked a booth by the window. Delphine walked in 10 minutes late, wearing lipstick this time, as if that would make her case stronger. She didn't order, just sat down and got straight to it. I know we're not close, she began, but you and I both know Mom played favorites. I had my issues fine, but you never forgave me for needing help. You didn't need help, I said. You needed an audience. That stung. I saw it flash across her face, just for a second. You don't even need the money, she snapped. This isn't about Mom. This is about punishing me. No, I replied. This is about you lying again. This is about you still using her name, like it owes you something. She rolled her eyes. God, you're so sanctimonious. Always have been. Just say it. You want me to suffer. I shook my head. I just want you to stop taking things that aren't yours. She stood. This was a waste of time. Then she was gone. Later that evening, I checked my mail. A cream envelope with the bank's logo caught my eye. I opened it while standing by the kitchen sink. It was a final statement from Mom's credit card. Her name still printed on top. Maureen Greaves. Charges dated just 48 hours earlier. $43.20 to Uber Eats. $96.50 to Sephora. $19.99 for a monthly wine box. Same card, same account. But Mom had been dead for over a week. The IP address tied to the charges? Delphine's apartment. I didn't gasp or cry. I didn't even feel shocked. She didn't just ask, I said quietly. She stole again. I sat down at my desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed Constance. Her voice came through on the second ring. Lorianne? I need to talk, I said, about credit card fraud, on an account that should have been closed. There was a pause. Then Constance said, I was wondering when you'd be ready to stop protecting her. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew in that moment. I wasn't protecting her anymore. I was protecting what Mom left behind. Not just the house or the finances, but her wishes, her trust. This time, she won't just lie and walk away, not if I stand in her way. 2 days after I called Constance, I woke up to a ping from my phone that didn't feel like any other notification. It wasn't a message or email. It was a live video alert. The title caught my eye before I even opened it. My Truth as a Daughter, What They Don't Want You to Know. I didn't need to guess who had posted it. I watched from the kitchen counter, still in my pajamas, coffee cooling in the mug beside me. There she was, Delphine, on Facebook Live, sitting in her car, tears streaming like she had practiced each one. Her voice cracked perfectly, just enough to sound believable to people who didn't know her. I never left Mom's side, she said into the camera. I gave up everything to be there for her. And now my own sister is trying to make me out to be some kind of criminal. Her voice wavered, then steadied. I know what real love looks like. I saw it in Mom's eyes every day. Not once did she say she didn't want me around. The comments started rolling in fast. Stay strong. You were always the better daughter. Some people only show up for the money. Hearts floated across the screen like confetti at a pity parade. I didn't react, not outwardly. I just walked over to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out the USB drive I had saved months ago. The hospice logs, time-stamped, signed, dated, sealed. Every visit, every shift, every day she didn't show up. I didn't upload anything yet. I just set the drive beside my laptop and sat there, letting the weight of it all settle into my chest like a stone. Later that afternoon, I checked the Facebook group my neighbor had added me to last year, Fresno Families United. I hadn't opened it in months. This time, the posts were waiting for me. Anyone else uncomfortable with how the younger daughter handled the memorial? I heard she didn't even arrive on time to the funeral. So disrespectful. My cousin worked at the care center, said she was cold to everyone, especially her mom. I stared at the screen. My name wasn't in the posts, but it didn't have to be. The intention was clear, and it spread fast. The notifications piled up. Direct messages from strangers. One said, God sees everything, even if the courts don't. Another, if my mom died, I wouldn't be so smug. I didn't respond. I didn't block them. I just let the silence sit for a while. That night, after dinner, I opened my laptop and wrote a single email to Constance. No intro, no fluff, just attachments, hospice rotation schedule, medical invoices, A log of every visitor, proof that Delphine's name never appeared in the final 90 days, and one sentence, I'm ready to defend my truth. The next morning, I wrote a public post, not on my personal page, but on the same group where they'd dragged my name through the digital mud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was plain, measured, clinical. While my mother was dying, I didn't have time to rehearse anything. I was busy taking care of her. Some people perform for sympathy, others just do the work. Attached were photos, notes, time logs, all dated, all real. I disabled comments before I hit post. I didn't refresh the page. I didn't read reactions. I left it there like a plaque in stone. No argument, no explanation. Later that day, I saw Delphine's response. A screenshot from her live video. Captioned, "When the truth hurts, some people run to spreadsheets." The likes poured in. I didn't care. Let her gather her audience. I had my records, and soon I'd have something else. That evening, while sitting on the porch with my tea, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a stranger, it was Constance. "Do you still want to move forward?" she asked. "Because if you do, I can have the paperwork filed by Monday." I looked out at the street, quiet, dusky, the day cooling into something calm. "Yes," I said. She wanted attention. Now she'll have all eyes on her in court. The next week moved fast, like time was trying to outrun the truth. I stayed off social media, stayed off group chats, stayed off anything that echoed Delphine's voice, but what I didn't stay off was official channels. I watched the case build from my laptop, page by page, timestamp by timestamp, like stacking bricks around a house that had been left open too long. It was Thursday morning when I got the alert. An automatic email from the county clerk's office. Property transfer request, filed under Maureen Greaves. I clicked, scrolled, and there it was. Filed under Delphine's name. Marked as sold. The date of sale, 2 days ago. The buyer, listed as a private cash party. The seller's signature? Maureen's. I stared at that signature for a long time. I knew every curl of Mom's writing. This wasn't hers. It was similar, but off. Slanted wrong, looped too smooth. Like someone had practiced. Delphine had only ever seen Mom's signature once. I remembered clearly. It was on a tax return Mom had asked me to help with 2 years ago. Delphine had hovered, asked about a refund she wasn't entitled to, watched as Mom signed at the bottom. It hit me then, not just the gall, but the plan. She'd been waiting to use that moment for something like this. I printed the documents. Then I called Constance. We met the next morning in her office. She had already pulled the file before I arrived. When I walked in, she motioned to a chair and placed a thick binder between us. "Brace yourself," she said. "I've been holding on to this since before your mother passed." She opened the binder. Inside were 3 key documents. The first, an updated will, notarized, naming me as the sole legal beneficiary. No split, no shared ownership, just my name. The second, a log signed by a third-party notary, proof of the meeting, the time, the state of mind. No coercion, no confusion. The third, a sealed envelope, my name on the front, Mom's handwriting. I stared at it for a few seconds before picking it up. I broke the seal. "To the one who stayed when staying cost everything," it began. My hands didn't shake, but my throat tightened as I read. "I know this isn't a prize," the letter went on, "but it's a way to say I saw you, even when I didn't always act like it. You earned more than a house. You earned peace, and I want to give you as much of it as I can." I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into my purse. Constance cleared her throat. "Now," she said, tapping the folder, "you want to press forward with fraud, or hold this back for leverage?" "I want her exposed," I said quietly. "No more soft landings." Constance nodded. "Then we'll file under both estate fraud and identity misrepresentation. And when the house listing goes public, because she will try again, we'll have everything in place." That afternoon, I sat with a probate attorney, filed the fraud report, and submitted copies of the forged documents, my mother's signature samples, and the Facebook harassment archive. Everything Delphine had touched, twisted, or tampered with was now evidence. By Monday morning, Delphine had been served. I didn't call her. I didn't respond to the voicemails. But I saw her panic online, passive-aggressive status updates, vague posts like, "Some people forget who family really is," and "I never asked for much, just not to be erased." She always had a flair for victimhood. I spent the next day cleaning the house. The kind of cleaning where you throw out things you didn't realize you'd been holding on to. Pill bottles with expired prescriptions, a shawl that still faintly smelled like Vicks, hospital forms crumpled at the bottom of drawers. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I just made space. By sunset, I was out in the yard, watering the rosebush Mom used to sit beside every spring. I looked up at the windows of the house. This house she wanted to leave to someone who wouldn't turn it into a transaction. I whispered, "It's not revenge. It's restoration." And I meant it. This wasn't about punishing Delphine anymore. This was about correcting the record, about honoring the woman who, at the end, had seen things clearly, even if it had taken too long. She used lies to take what wasn't hers. Now the truth will take it back. 3 days passed after the summons had been served. Long enough for the shock to wear off, but not long enough for Delphine to sit with it. That morning, while making labels for shipping orders in the kitchen, I noticed my dashboard was acting strange. At first, it was a handful of refund requests, nothing that raised a flag. But by noon, they came in waves. Canceled orders, strange usernames with no history, multiple chargebacks logged within hours. I clicked through messages. They weren't about product defects. They weren't even from real buyers. They read like a coordinated attack. Liar. You steal from the dead. Scamming people under your mother's name? Classy. My heart didn't race. I'd learned by now to go still before reacting. I cross-referenced the complaint emails with the spam tracker Constance had once told me about. The source? An IP linked to an old domain, delphinecarowrites.com, her defunct blog from 2018. She hadn't posted in years, but apparently the login still worked. By evening, Etsy had flagged my store. They'd pause my payouts for manual review, pending verification, so that's how she wanted to play it. The next morning, a neighbor sent me a text with a screenshot. "Hey, thought you might want to know. Your house is on Craigslist, again." I followed the link. My stomach turned. A full listing. Charming 3-bedroom bungalow, cash only, no agents, serious buyers only. Priced at $89,000. Laughable. The market value was double that. But it wasn't the price that hit me. It was the contact number. I recognized it. Jaren's prepaid phone, Delphine's son. I called the number. It rang twice, then straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Jay. Can't pick up. Text me." I didn't text. I called the city records office instead. As expected, no legitimate sale had been filed. No MLS listing. No permission to sell. She wasn't trying to sell the house. She was trying to make it look unstable. Unclaimed. Confused. Like something caught in probate limbo, so someone, somewhere, might bite. I tried calling Delphine. Blocked. By early afternoon, I was behind the wheel, driving to the apartment she'd moved into 6 months before Mom passed. The one she'd claimed was just temporary until she got back on her feet. I parked down the street and walked up the worn steps. The complex was quiet. Midday sun beating down. Not a car on the block. She opened the door halfway. No greeting. Just her eyebrows lifted like she'd been expecting me. "You're fast," she said, arms crossed. "Figured it might take you a week to find the ad." "You can't sell something that isn't yours," I said. "I'm not selling," she replied. "Just testing the waters. No harm in gauging interest, right?" "It's fraud." "It's Craigslist," she said with a shrug. "People post garbage every day. You can't sue over curiosity." I stepped closer. You forged a signature, filed false paperwork, and now you're trying to scare off any potential legal interest in the house. You think I don't see the pattern? She smirked. You can't sue for a house if no one will buy from you. There it was. The slip. The intent. You tried to erase me at Mom's funeral, I said quietly. Now you're trying to erase her home. That ends here. She leaned against the doorframe. You always act like you're above it all. But we both know, deep down, you love being the martyr. I turned away without responding. Back at home, I took screenshots of the Craigslist listing, saved the HTML source, logged the time, sent everything to Constance and the estate's fraud liaison. The reply from the clerk was short and to the point. Active violation of standing injunction, escalating to judicial enforcement. I sat in my office with the curtains half closed, the light outside starting to soften as the day began its quiet retreat. I wasn't angry, not the kind of anger that needed yelling or slamming drawers. I cleaned the living room instead, folded blankets, watered the plants, moved my mother's favorite chair a little closer to the window. That night, I prepared a small dinner, ate alone, and turned my phone to silent. I wasn't avoiding the noise. I was choosing not to participate. Delphine wanted me scattered. She wanted me unraveled. She wanted me to lash out, make mistakes, prove her narrative right. But I'd been through enough to know that real strength doesn't shout. It acts. She thought playing dirty would keep me quiet. But I've learned to fight fire without burning myself. By the time the weekend rolled in, my phone had gone blissfully silent. No more fake buyers. No petty emails from strangers who believed a curated livestream. No more late-night Craigslist listings. I kept everything forwarded to Constance. I didn't have the energy to answer pettiness with more pettiness. Sunday night, just past midnight, I was about to plug in my phone and turn out the lights when a message lit up my screen. The name stopped me. Joran Caro, Delphine's son. He'd never reached out to me directly before, barely spoke at the funeral. I hesitated before opening it. Hey, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I remember you being with Grandma every day when she got bad. You were the one who helped her sleep. She told me that once, that you helped her breathe easier. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, heart not racing, but quietly folding inward. Then came the next message. I don't know what's true anymore, but thank you. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The next day, I received an invite for a family lunch organized by Mom's cousin Claire. She had mentioned wanting to do something more personal, less performative than the funeral. A chance for the family to talk without the pressure. I almost declined. But I went. It was held in a small event room at a quiet restaurant in downtown Fresno. White tablecloths, pre-printed menus, a simple photo of Mom framed by the door, this time with no edits. Just her. Laughing. Wrinkles visible, makeup slightly smudged. Real. I walked in 5 minutes early and was greeted by polite nods and half hugs. Claire came over and squeezed my shoulder. I'm glad you came, she said softly. Delphine showed up 20 minutes late, wearing heels and a smug expression. She made her rounds quickly, smiling, laughing too loudly, correcting people who didn't recall details quite right. No, it was me who brought Mom her favorite soup when she was at home. Lorian had work that day, I think. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. We sat through lunch, chicken marsala and iced tea, when the conversation turned toward Mom's final months. A few people said the usual. She had such strength, or she never complained. And then the room quieted. A voice at the far end of the table broke the lull. Aunt Melba. She hadn't spoken much all lunch. She was in her 70s now, sharp as ever, and didn't bother with pleasantries. She stood, slowly, and rested her hands on the back of her chair. I want to say something, she said, before anyone else spins this story into something it's not. Delphine's fork stopped mid-air. I visited Maureen often, not every day, but enough, and we talked. More than you might think. She looked directly at Delphine. She told me, months before she passed, "My younger daughter is my witness. If anything's left of me, it's her." A silence spread like spilled wine. "She said Lorian was the one who saw her," Aunt Melba continued. "Saw her in pain, saw her fears, saw her truth. Not because she had to, but because she chose to." Delphine didn't speak. Her face drained of color. Someone at the table, maybe Cousin Rachel, murmured under her breath, "We always wondered why Delphine didn't visit." The weight of the room shifted. Conversations became fragmented. Delphine left her seat. No scene, no comment. She just stood and walked out. Joren followed her silently, not meeting anyone's eyes. I stayed. Afterward, I walked the few blocks home alone. The sky was clear, just warm enough to carry the scent of spring. I passed a small florist's cart outside a corner market. The lilies caught my eye, bright white, just beginning to open. I almost bought them, but instead, I kept walking. At the cemetery gate, I stopped, reached into my purse, and pulled out the folded note I'd written earlier that week. I taped it to the gate softly, right below the bronze nameplate. "You're not gone. You're just no longer in her shadow." And I meant it. For the first time, I felt no need to prove anything. Not to the family, not to the town, not even to myself. The record was correcting itself, organically, word by word, from people who had seen things unfold. It wasn't justice yet, but it was beginning. One more step, and the story she wrote about me would finally be undone. In court, in record, and in memory. The courthouse hallway smelled like freshly waxed tile and faint printer ink. I sat on the wooden bench outside Department 9B, hands resting on my lap, fingers still. Constance sat beside me, flipping through a file she had already memorized. Across the hall, the door creaked, and Delphine stepped out, alone. No attorney, no folder, just her purse and sunglasses, even though we were indoors. She glanced my way, but I didn't meet her eyes. I looked up instead, toward the ceiling, toward nothing in particular. Maybe toward Mom. The bailiff called us in. The room was nearly empty, no jury, just a judge, a clerk, and 2 witnesses who wouldn't need to speak. It was procedural, clean, but my heart moved slow in my chest, like it knew what this meant. The judge's tone was steady, firm, without edge. He spoke as if he'd seen this 100 times and knew exactly how it would end before it even started. "This court upholds the validity of the 2023 revised will. All assets named within are to be transferred to Ms. Lorian Blythe. The estate is settled. Court adjourned." That was it. I heard Constance whisper, "It's done." I stood, not fast, just enough to feel it in my knees. I walked out without looking back. I didn't need to. Outside, reporters waited. Not many, just 2 or 3 local faces with cameras. One asked if I had a statement. "There's no statement," I said, my voice calm. "Just closure." They didn't press. When I got home, the sun was beginning to drop behind the neighbors' trees. The porch light hadn't come on yet. I stepped onto the welcome mat and noticed something taped to my front door. An envelope, no handwriting on the outside. Just taped neatly, sealed. I opened it inside at the kitchen table. A photo. It was the original from Mom's last birthday, the one Delphine had cropped for the funeral. But this was the full image. All 3 of us. Mom in the middle, me on one side, Delphine on the other. I had taken that picture with the timer and balanced the phone on a napkin dispenser. There was no note inside the envelope, nothing written on the back, just the photo. I didn't cry, I didn't frame it. I placed it in the drawer with Mom's last letter and closed it gently. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but not in a haunting way, more like a room that had been cleaned after guests overstayed their welcome. A text from a mutual acquaintance came through the following Friday. "Did you hear? Delphine got evicted. Joren's living with his dad now. She started a GoFundMe, but no one's donating." I didn't respond. The following Sunday, I bought lilies from the same florist stand I had passed a dozen times without stopping. I walked to the cemetery just after noon. It was warm but not hot, and the air held that kind of stillness you only get in spring when everything is beginning again. I knelt at Mom's grave, brushed away some dried leaves, and placed the lilies in the holder at the base of the stone. I didn't speak, not out loud. I just taped a new note behind the headstone, tucked low enough that only I would know it was there. You chose me when it mattered, that's enough. And it was. I took the long way home, past the park where she used to walk before her knees gave out, past the corner bakery that had always overpriced the coffee she loved. The sidewalks weren't crowded. My phone buzzed a few times. I didn't check. Back on my porch, I sat with a blanket over my knees. A breeze caught the edge of the wind chime by the door, setting off a soft, clinking rhythm. My phone pinged again. I picked it up and smiled, just a little. A new order had come in for the handmade tea towels I'd listed the week before. Simple, embroidered, stitched with quotes about grace and strength and legacy. They weren't flashy, but they were mine. I opened my laptop and began typing a blog post I'd been working on in my head for weeks. When you're erased long enough, you start believing you were never there. But I was. And now the world knows it too. I paused, then added one last line. Justice doesn't fix everything, but it gave me back my name.